Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dorothy here from CCMA. Happy New Year to everybody. I think it's still okay to say Happy New Year at this point for another day or maybe. Delighted to see so many on board this morning. And this is our first webinar of 2021. And it's the first of a series of 4 that Alison, who you see on screen there, is going to host for us. And it'll be every second Friday. So this is the first of 4. And today we're talking about Team Cohesion. And for those of you who joined the webinars before, you know, we normally give just a minute or 2 for everybody to log in. You'll see Niamh on screen there from WSI, who supports our webinars and is there to look after all the technologies and when the gremlins come in. But we really want to make this as interactive as possible. And I suppose we're all conscious that where we're at now in lockdown 3 is that it's very hard to keep ourselves and our teams motivated. And we obviously at this point know that we're going to be in this remote and home working situation for yet another while to come. So I think this morning Alison is just going to give some very valuable hints and tips and, you know, discussion points for us all to think about how we continue to build this team cohesion, recognising the challenging circumstances that many people are working in currently. And we also recognise for many of the member companies, you know, for some, your activities have gone way up and you're much busier than you ever were. And for others, it's been the opposite. And that can have its own challenge on keeping a team motivated and engaged if the calls aren't coming in or the emails or the texts or anything through your social channels. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. As always, we're recording the webinar, so it'll be available afterwards for people to follow in. We have a half an hour and we really would like you to send through any questions, comments, observations. I'll keep an eye on them in the little chat box to the right-hand side. And I'll put them to Alison at the appropriate time. But for the moment, I'm going to hand over to Alison and I'll let you take it away. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks very much. Happy New Year, everybody. Nice to see you all again. Okay, so today we're going to talk about team cohesion. And in previous webinars that I've done, which are all up on the CCMA website, I talked about staff engagement, how to motivate staff. Also talked about fun things to do with staff to keep engagement and motivation higher. So I'm not going to focus on that today, because that information, including the presentations, are all up on the website, so you can go back and have a look if you weren't able to make those webinars. So today I'm going to talk about team cohesion. So I'm going to just start with my putting my thing up there. Great. So here we go. All right, so we're going to talk about leading a virtual team and team cohesion. So the agenda today is we're going to do a reality check about how your team are collaborating and supporting each other now. We're going to look at what are the norms and protocols, in other words, the rules of engagement about how you're going to work together as a team. Just a few tips on selecting and onboarding some new recruits and integrating them into the team. Lessons that we learned from the previous lockdown. Sometimes I know it feels like Groundhog Day, but just some reminders about, you know, what we did well previously and a good opportunity maybe for you to look at and think about what worked before and do you need to do that again. And then some practical tips to foster team cohesion. And here we'd love to hear what you guys are doing. So we're going to ask you a couple of questions. So please put in any suggestions or ideas or questions into the questions box rather than the message box. I look at that wrong. All right, so let's look at what is team cohesion. So team cohesion is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Does that sound really touchy-feely? Yeah, it does, because we are emotional beings and we are, you know, human. And so how we feel and how we work well with each other and how we the relationships that we build are incredibly important. And within a work environment, the research shows that, you know, those relationships are actually what binds people to you and your organization and your team. So there's been loads of research done on team cohesion, and I would encourage you all to go out and, you know, just have a look at what, you know, what people are doing within your own company, but also within, you know, your industry perhaps, about, you know, what are the qualities and what makes a good team. So there's one report, and I put a link to it from Google. They've done a huge report around trying to find out what is it, what are those little special nuggets that make teams successful. So they looked at all sorts of different criteria. Was it the skills or the knowledge or the experience of the team? Was it you know, whether the team were all, you know, similar. Was it the diversity? Was it the manager? All sorts of things about, you know, or was it the type of team? Like, was it a technology team, a support team, an admin team, HR team? Anyway, they did massive amount of research, which you can see in the report. And what they basically came to was that the qualities of a successful team. Now they had like hundreds of qualities, but these 5 were the top 5 in order. And so the qualities for a successful team is psychological safety. And what does that mean? That means that an individual feels safe in their own team to be able to voice their opinions, and they feel safe to take risks in saying what they think. Or also the big one here is that they feel safe that they're not going to be attacked or embarrassed if they make an error or if they fail at something, or they won't be punished for admitting vulnerability. That's probably the most important thing around psychological safety. And so,
sorry, Alison.
Yeah.
Not cutting across you there. I think when you shared your slides, your audio's kind of dropped off a little bit. We might swap to me sharing the slides just so that your audio's not affected, if that's okay.
Right. Okay. Or I'm using headphones. Should I maybe not use them?
We'll try. We'll see if this helps on it, maybe.
Okay, great. Thanks, Neve. Okay.
1 second, guys.
Shall I unshare?
No, I can take it here.
Okay, right. Okay. Oh, so. Okay.
Sorry. Now.
Okay.
Let's see if that's any better.
Okay, does that sound any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, great. Apologies, everyone. Technical difficulties. That's why we have the wonderful Neve with us. Okay, so okay, so we talked about psychological safety. It's really important, and it's one of those things that, especially in Ireland, we have this sort of culture of, you know, that sort of slagging each other culture. And I have to say, I lived abroad for about 20 years, and when I came back to Ireland, it was one of the things that I found most difficult to get used to again, was that piece around people slagging each other off. Oh, it's just a joke, ha ha ha. And I think for everyone, including those of you who don't have a massively diverse team in terms of cultural background, it's really important to keep an eye and an ear out for that. Because while there's nothing wrong with a bit of banter, it's just really important that we are aware of how our words land with people. So I definitely think that's a piece that if you're feeling uneasy about how your team are getting together, that may be something you want to keep an eye on. Not to make anyone wrong who does the banter, but it's just around, this is where we're going to come along to how we're going to work together as a team, how your team can make those decisions together. Okay, so the other pieces around qualities of a successful team are dependability. Do people do what they say they're going to do? Do they deliver for each other? That's incredibly important. Structure and clarity. Do people know what their roles are? Do they know what's expected of them? That's you as a leader. That's where you can really get clarity, help people get clarity about what expectations are of them. Do they know why they're doing things? What's the point of their role? You know, what's the point of the team? How, you know, what is the team's purpose? That's a big one, particularly with millennials. But with all of us, we want to feel like what we're doing makes a difference, and has a purpose. And then the impact, that's the personal impact that each individual team member has. So that's really how they contribute to the whole. So people who have clarity and understand these, and the team has decided what these 5 things are for themselves and delivers it in terms of behaves that way, that can make for a very successful team. I put a link in there to the report, so I'm not going to go into it now, but it's just so simple and good, and have a look at it for yourself. Each of you, your organization is different, so it'll be different for each of you. Okay, can we move ahead? Neve, thanks. Great. Okay, so a reality check. We're going to do 2 polls now, and the first one basically is, how would you rate team cohesion at the moment? within your team. You can see there you've got 4 options there, and just intuitively just go for whichever one actually describes how your team is cohesion together, working together now. All right, just give that a few minutes to come, or a few seconds to come through. Just press a button.
Okay, we've got those answers coming in now, so we'll just give people another 10-15 seconds and then close it out.
Thanks, Steve. Great. So as Dorothy was saying earlier on, your particular context within your organization, your team within the organization, and also the bigger context about what's happening in the world around you guys, will impact on how your team are working together. Okay, so 18% say that it's higher than it was before COVID. 41% say that it's the same as ever, and 41% say that it's lower. It was lower than before COVID. Okay, so there you can see that nearly 60% say same or higher, and 40% say lower. And I love the fact that nobody said I don't know, which is really good. So you can see that while there's some really good positive stuff, there's also some stuff there that we have to probably put a bit more work into team cohesion now that we're working either virtually or a mix, because I know quite a few of you still have people within offices, but they may be spread over multiple offices. So getting that physical team together is difficult, if not impossible. So actually those results are probably cheering overall. Okay, so the second poll is basically to give us some ideas about what you're doing at the moment, or what you've been doing that have actually positively impacted your team cohesion. So just think about probably the biggest impact that any one thing has had on team cohesion. So if you just put that into the questions box so we can get some ideas through, and Dorothy, you can feed them back.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks a million.
And Alison, I see that you're talking, I know you're going to come on this a state of mind. What do you mean by a one-word state of mind check-in?
Oh, sorry. So a one-word state of mind check-in is really just to go, okay, how are you feeling today? Rather than ask somebody to explain it, just a one word. It might be excited, it might be, it could be fearful, it could be, lethargic, it could be pumped, it could be apprehensive. It's just a one word, no judgment, and it just gets us used to using and talking those emotional feeling words, which we may not be used to. And it also really, at the very top of a meeting, it reminds us all that that these are people we're talking to. These are people with emotions we're talking to, and it's not all just work.
Okay, so a couple of things back. Audrey, hi Audrey. We have regular video meetings where we don't talk about work, but just have a good catch up and a chat. And I certainly know a lot of companies are doing that sort of coffee catch up type thing.
Yeah.
Anya Brady says that they do the one word check-in, which is great. Bridget says a daily huddle focused on productivity and to check in with everyone. And then Audrey just added, we also do one-to-ones where we can check in with people privately. We have set up mental health first aid team, which is a great idea. And talks about set steps, challenges, remote bake-offs, casual Friday get-togethers. So I think people are still trying to bring in that fun element and just the separate to work. Julie mentions we have team games for an hour every couple of weeks. But I suppose what you're saying is you also need to do a daily, basically, check-in. And I know it'll change from day to day depending on people's personal circumstances.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too prescriptive because people will understand what they need for themselves. But as a team leader, particularly at the moment, because there is a lot of fear and media and everything. There's so much news coming at us, and there's COVID's out of control and all this sort of stuff. So it may be just to step up those daily, or not every day, but those individual check-ins, and ensure that you check in with people who you might think, oh no, they're fine, because understanding people's personal circumstances is important. So all that stuff that you guys are doing is absolutely brilliant around that whole piece around making your team feel cohesive. Really important. I guess that what I think is a very vital one is these team meetings, because sometimes what happens is we have individual meetings or we have little smaller group meetings because it might be about a particular project or a particular issue. But those bigger team meetings, the whole team are really important to have both social. I love the idea of the social ones and the work ones. It's actually extremely important to have those. And it's really important that in those you have an opportunity for everyone to contribute. So, important for people to give their own updates, or as I said, that little maybe check in as well. But those bigger team meetings.
Sorry, Alison, just to add, I presume for a lot of companies, this is the year for, at the time of the year for planning and setting targets for the year. I know it might vary depending on your financial calendar year, but it is that people they've been left out of those conversations that would normally happen if you're in an office environment and there'd be a town hall meeting or whatever. It's important to make sure they're included in all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's even more important now. And the other piece around it is that a lot of communication has gone to email or into sort of, online systems, and I think it's important that even if you sent out communications, maybe from the centralized teams around things like strategy, around things like setting your performance metrics, performance management, any of those things that are sent out, it's really important that you, as the team leader, address them in the team meeting. So, does anyone have any questions? What did you think about it? Any feedback? All those types of things. This is the way we will be putting this in place within our team. And the other piece I think that's important is the piece around talking to your team about how you're working together, how you want to work together, how it's going, what you could improve on. All those types of things are really important. So not just what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Okay, so this is really around, a reality check. Each of you might have different ways of doing a reality check with your team, but making sure that the bigger picture is that whatever happening in your team, there's a context to it, which is a wider context, and life is the context. And what I mean by that is, it may be what's the context about what else is happening in the company. Dorothy, you already mentioned you might be busier than you've ever been. You might be less busy than you've ever been. You might have more customers coming at you. You might have you might have totally different type of work. A lot of people have pivoted the type of work that they're doing in a lot of companies. The way that customers are engaging with you might be very different. It might have all been by phone and now it's by email. It may be that customers have much more issues. There's so much stuff coming down the track. Like this Brexit thing, for any of you who are importing and exporting in that business, there's going to be a million questions. And a bit like the pandemic itself, there isn't not everything is known, issues are arising by the day, and there isn't anyone with all the answers. So this living with ambiguity is actually something that, for those of you who are dealing with the Brexit issues, is actually rolling over you all over again. So that, it might have Groundhog Day multiplied by 2, not just having the COVID issues, but having the Brexit issues where there aren't actually definitive answers. And having a resilient team and having a team that supports each other can be so important in these scenarios. So one of the things that I'd say is, do your reality check, ask your people both individually and collectively. So ask them on their own, but also in meetings, how are you feeling? What's working? Accentuate the positive. What's working within the team? What can we do more of? What do the individual need from the team? What can they offer the team? This is lovely. I remember we were on a webinar like this a couple of months ago, and somebody was saying that in their team meetings, their huddles in the morning, they say, one of the things that everyone says is, this is what I'm working on, this is what I need from the team, this is what I can give. And what I can give could be, I have this information, or I have an hour or two this afternoon, or whatever it is, whatever resources that you can give to the team. And that's really setting up that mutuality. And maybe sometimes if you're mad busy, well, all you can offer the team is your best wishes, and that may be enough. So then there's other ways that you can gather and share data. You can look at what the individual and team behaviors are like. How are people interacting with each other? And you've got your engagement surveys. And the other piece that you really need to look at is, what are your outcomes, like your team, what they delivered, what are they and what's their impact? And sharing this information is really important, because that goes back to what's the meaning and purpose of the work that we're doing. And the other piece is that when we're working in this more flexible way, it's important for us to understand that it's not the day-to-day, to-do list that's important. It's actually what we deliver is really important, because managing people flexibly, you should be measuring them on outcomes and not on, what they do, or presenteeism, did they work for 8 hours today, etc. I know for those of you within a call center environment or within an environment of customer service, it is actually about, how many emails they took today, as well as the quality. But what I'm trying to get at there is that it's actually maybe customer satisfaction that is the outcome, and and getting through, satisfying as many customers as possible. I hope that makes sense. Okay. And Niamh, can we go to the next slide?
And Alison, we've about 9 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay. So, one of the things I talked about in previous webinars is this importance about agreeing how you want to work together. And the piece here that I would say that's important is behaviors, how you want to behave with each other. A classic example is, we need to listen to each other, but then in meetings, people interrupt each other all the time. So it's important that we agree behavior and then we review behavior. In other words, so are we sticking to these things? And also we can call out behavior in meetings when we see that it doesn't suit. It's not the behavior that we agree. Really important to be flexible on this. One of the beautiful things about being able to work from home and have more flexibility about when we do our work is that it does give us the flexibility. So it's important not to get prescriptive on the protocols. I've heard of people saying, oh, well, what we want is we only want to work between these hours. And that might work for some people, but for people who've got kids at home who they're homeschooling, it may not suit them to work in a classic 9 to 5. So, your norms and protocols are important. Another one that might be here is, I think one of the most important ones is response times. If people are working flexibly, which is a great thing, then you need to get yourself comfortable with this idea of asynchronous communication. In other words, when you send an email, you don't get you may not get an automatic reply, because people are working different time scales or they're focusing on different things at different times. So agree within your team about what are agreed response times to things like emails. Okay, so keep in mind flexibility, experiment, and keep an open mind about what these normal protocols may be. But it's really important that these show respect to the individual as well as respect to actually getting the work done. Okay, the next slide, please, Niamh. Okay, selecting and onboarding new recruits. So just a few ideas here. So review, in the selection process, review what the roles are and the process with the team and ask them for feedback, because let's see whether we need to change anything about the way we've been doing. I know a lot of you have been recruiting. Make sure you discuss working from home at the interview and what their expectations are and what yours are. Involve your team with individual catch-ups prior to hiring. Quick catch-ups on coffee, and you might have one person talking about, what it's like to work within this team, or somebody else talking about, what training development is within, somebody else, give them specific things about what they can talk about with the recruit and get asked for their feedback. Really important, and one that I'm sure most of you are doing, is you need to run a test on the broadband speed if they're working from home. Really important that you understand whether actually that can work. And then when you're onboarding, obviously you do what, you engage with your HR team or your people and cultures team, making sure that they have all of the support and the training that they need. A buddy system within the team, extremely important that they have a buddy within the team that they can ask questions, and make sure you pick a buddy who wants to do it, and check in with the buddy as well as checking in with the new recruit. A really good one is to arrange a mentor from outside the team. So that might be someone from your culture team or your HR team or your training team, but it may be someone from another team, just to allow them to talk to someone who isn't in their immediate team. And with new recruits, I think it's a really important check-in daily. And if as a manager you don't have the bandwidth to check in with them daily, ensure that someone is checking in with them daily. And then another one I think that I I've used myself quite a bit is new recruits have a fresh eye, and I would really encourage you to get them to talk about how the selection process went, you know, how onboarding went, so they can give feedback to the team as a whole, just so the team understand how it all worked. But also, a new recruit is a wonderful person to review, you know, work that the team are doing on projects or on processes or stuff like that, because they've got a fresh eye. And so they're not inculcated in this, how we do things around here. Neve, can you go on to the next slide? I'm going really fast, guys, so I'm sorry. Lessons from previous lockdowns. Number one lesson for managers: relax. No perfect way to do this. You and your team will find a way together. Look after yourself and model the behaviors you want to see, because you're the role model, and a huge impact on engagement is the relationship that individuals have with their line manager. So that's a really big indicator of people being engaged and also staying with the organization. Remember that each member is different, and this diversity is the strength of your team. Find ways to celebrate the differences. This is important because we sometimes think about diversity as being maybe gender or race, but there's a massive amount of diversity. For instance, there's people in your team who are introverts, there's people who are extroverts, there's people who you know, learn visually, there's people who prefer to read stuff, there's people who like to give opinions, there's people who are more restless. Everyone is different, and it's actually having diversity and encouraging diversity that actually will help you, and particularly if you encourage people to ask questions. Make part of your work day or week a COVID-free zone. This is one that I think quite a few people probably suggested, and this is just really around, you know, there's enough talk, and maybe you just say, listen, you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays we're not talking about COVID, because we forget that for some people actual working is a respite from other stuff that's happening. It's really vital that you continue with team training, development, and encouraging people to take a broader picture of their career and their role. So this is a time when you should be encouraging people to take on maybe new study or do some training. And similarly for yourself, obviously taking into account, you know, what else is going on in their lives. For you yourself, I think it's, if you don't have one already, make sure you've got a peer team within your organization where you can share ideas and concerns with people who are doing similar jobs to you. And then finally, Leave the next slide and the final slide, practical tips. So as I said, there's loads of tips that, in previous seminars that I've done, or webinars, sorry, that I've done, which are around fun and engagement. But these are ones really around getting the team working together. Celebrate your small wins often. Okay, so call people out on, you know, good stuff that they've done. Encourage positive feedback. Really, you know, I think I think it's called the Pareto ratio, where they say that you need at least 3, and some people say 5 positive things to any sort of negative feedback, because people are attuned to the negative. Focus on improvement rather than, you know, what went wrong. So what did we improve from last time? How can we do more of that? Emphasize learning over winning. This is really important for new recruits. So, you know, what did we learn? That's a great question to ask when people are giving you updates. So what did you learn? Work on active listening with your team. Talk about listening, how you can show that you're listening. And that comes to Zoom etiquette. I've seen some appalling Zoom etiquette lately. I've seen people who are pushing things around their desk, and they're obviously looking at emails, they're looking at their phone, and they're huffing and puffing. When you're talking to someone, it's really, really important, especially when you're talking one-on-one with someone, that you look them in the eye, look the camera in the eye, and think about them and focus on them. Have a standing item on your team on team morale or cohesion in your team meetings, and encourage team members to give shout outs to each other on people who help them. And another tip that I have here is brainstorm ways your team can assist each other with non-work related activities. I've heard some wonderful stuff going on here, which is around people are giving virtual grinds to colleagues' kids. They're doing reading with colleagues' kids. Also maybe doing sort of tutorials on DIY, on cooking, on crafting, maybe study groups on books, or if people are studying together, or if a lot of companies, especially in financial services, people are studying for different levels of qualification. So getting people together to study for those is also good. Okay, I ran my mouth and we're out of time nearly, but I'm willing to take any questions at this stage.
Yeah, I think an observation more than a question, Alison. On you said, good point around dealing with ambiguity. Important to do sessions around change. Do they understand how they react to change, knowing that allows them to face it with less stress and allows you to support your team on an individual basis?
Yeah, and I did some slides on that. I think it was in the very first CCMA webinar that I did, which was around the change curve, and also how you manage people through change, how you support people through change. So if you want to have a look at those, they may
perfect. And then just two last things. Bridget from VHI mentioned that they have a team WhatsApp group focused on outside of work photography to stay connected positively, which is great. And actually, there was loads of people taking pictures. I don't know if you saw the sky this morning. It was beautiful here, and loads of people were putting pictures up. I could hear it on the radio. And then they also do a monthly letter with photos to highlight strengths of the team and recognize performance and job well done. So I think all of those things that you normally
lovely. Yeah,
important.
That's really lovely. Yeah, great. And one other idea was do a walking team meeting, so people have their phones and you can do a catch up when you're out walking. I heard someone who does that once a week, and I thought that was quite cute.
Great. So I'm conscious of time. A couple of updates just to give everybody, and thanks obviously, Alison. And I know we'll have a copy of the webinar and a copy of the presentation will go up now after this. I'll put it up straight away. Just our next session with Alison is on Friday the 29th, and it's on work-life balance. And the other thing,
maybe, sorry, just if people have any comments or questions or anything they wanted to cover on that, just send us an email and we'll work on it.
Yeah, perfect, great. And we're working on our schedule of events for the first quarter of the year. So we've a couple of Avaya events taking place. One the last week on the 27th of January. So I'm looking at my diary here. I'm not distracted, I promise. And the other one, which I think everybody really enjoys, we've John Reardon from Shopify back with us on the 3rd of February. So if all of you might remember, John Reardon probably did one of the first webinars for us last March. And Shopify always were remote.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Really good insights in terms of lessons learned and what his suggestions would be for going forward. So that's a good one. So just keep checking in on the website. We'll obviously be emailing everybody. And the last thing to say, we are conscious of the whole networking aspect and how that has been very limited, obviously, because we can't physically meet. So we'll be communicating to everybody about some networking groups we want to set up in the next couple of weeks on things like workforce planning, onboarding, training and development. So they're open to everybody. Just put your hand up if you want to take part, and it'll just be a way of those groups of people meeting and doing some sort of network online and hopefully learning and engaging with each other and getting tips, etc. from each other. So thanks a million. We're 3 minutes over. Sorry about that. But Alison, great to see you. And Niamh, thanks as always for helping out. And hope everybody has a lovely weekend and gets to relax and enjoy the dry weather.
Thanks
a million, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.